So you've seen it, right? You're watching a game, any game really, and a player just can't miss. Shot after shot, they're just sinking them. We all call it the hot hand. It feels so real. But what if it isn't? What if it's all in our heads? Today, we're going to dig into a legendary study that pretty much turned everything we thought we knew about streaks completely upside down.
Oh, you know the scene. Come on. A basketball player. They sink a really tough shot. Okay, nice. Then another one and another. The announcer is just losing their mind. The crowd is going absolutely wild. And everyone, I mean everyone in that stadium, and you at home on the couch, we're all thinking the exact same thing. This player is on fire. They have the hot hand.
I mean, it feels real, doesn't it? It just seems so obvious. But what if that powerful gut feeling we all have is just flat out wrong? What if the hot hand is just an illusion? Well, a group of pretty famous researchers, we're talking Gilovich, Vilzoni, and the legendary Tversky, they decided to put it to the test. All right, so part one of their investigation. Before they even touched any stats or game tapes, these started with a simple question. What do people believe? They went out and surveyed about 100 die-hard basketball fans to figure out just how deep this whole hot hand idea really goes. And the results? Whoa. They were absolutely overwhelming. A whopping 91% of these fans were convinced that a player has a better shot of making their next basket right after they just made one. This wasn't just a popular idea. It was basically gospel.
And you know, this belief has real consequences for how the game is played. 84% of those same fans said, yeah, of course you should pass the ball to the player on a streak. The strategy seems so simple, right? Feed the hot hands. But the big question is, does that logic actually work?
Okay, so the belief is crystal clear. Now we move on to part two. Let's check the tape. The researchers were done with opinions. It was time to look at the cold, hard data. They analyzed thousands and thousands of actual shots from real NBA games to see if what we think happens is what actually happens. So what they did was get their hands on the shot-by-shot data for the entire Philadelphia 76ers team for an entire season. We're talking every single shot, every hit, and every miss. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was time for the numbers to do the talking.
All right, get ready for this, because this is the first big bombshell. Now, if the hot hand was a real thing, you'd expect the shooting percentage after a hit to be higher, right? Well, it's not. In fact, look at this. Players shot 51% after a make, but they actually shot a little better, 54% right after a miss. How weird is that?
So what does this actually mean? It means that across an entire season of professional basketball, there was literally zero evidence to support the hot hand theory. If anything, the numbers kind of pointed the other way. This was a huge, shocking discovery. It flew in the face of what pretty much every single fan and player believed. Now you might be thinking, okay, but hold on. A real game is chaotic. You know, the defense gets tougher on a guy who just scored. Maybe he takes a riskier shot next time. And that's a fair point. So the researchers decided to strip all that away. They moved on to the most controlled environment in basketball, the free throw. And for this part, they looked at data from the Boston Celtics. And not just any player, but the legendary Larry Bird, one of the guys people would always say was a streak shooter. I mean, a free throw is perfect for this, isn't it? It's just you and the basket, no defenders in your face, same distance every single time. If the hot hand is real, you've got to see it here. And you won't believe it. The results are just as stunning. Even with a legend like Larry Bird, the pattern is the same. Check this out. He shot 88% on his second free throw after making the first one, but he shot 91% after missing the first one. Again, no evidence. The opposite, in fact. So at this point, the conclusion is getting really hard to ignore. We've looked at multiple NBA teams, we've looked at messy in-game shots, and we've looked at clean, controlled free throws. And in every single case, the data just isn't there. Making a shot just didn't seem to make you any more likely to make the next one. But wait. There's one last crucial piece of this puzzle. The players. I mean, they're the ones who feel like they're on fire, right? So for their final experiment, the researchers brought college players into a gym for a totally controlled shooting test. They wanted to see if that feeling of being hot actually matched up with reality. The setup was simple. Each player took 100 shots from different spots. And when all the data was in, guess what? It was the exact same story as with the pros. Whether a player had just made or missed their last shot had zero bearing on whether the next one went in. And here's the real kicker. This is the craziest part. They had the players bet on their own shots during the experiment. And the players, they were super confident. They thought they knew for sure when they were hot and about to make one, but their predictions were no better than just flipping a coin. That feeling of being on fire, it had absolutely no connection to their actual result. So, this all leads to the study's massive conclusion. The hot hand isn't real. It's not a physical thing that happens to a player. It's a cognitive thing. It's an illusion. It's a trick our brains play on us because we are hardwired to see patterns, even in places where they don't exist. Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all. If the data is this clear, why do we all believe in it so strongly? Why does it feel so real? Well, the answer has to do with a huge misunderstanding our brains have about one simple idea: randomness. Okay, think about flipping a coin. If I asked you what a random sequence of heads and tails looks like, you'd probably imagine something like what's on the left, a nice even mix. Heads, tails, heads, tails. But what real randomness looks like is the sequence on the right. It's messy, it's clumpy. You get streaks of heads and streaks of tails just by pure random chance. So let's bring this back to basketball. When we see a player sink 3 shots in a row, our brain, which is basically a pattern-finding machine, just screams, "That's a streak, he's on fire." We totally forget that in any random sequence, like shooting a basketball, clumps are going to happen. Streaks of 3 or 4 in a row aren't just possible, they're statistically guaranteed to happen eventually. It doesn't mean anything special is going on, it's just what random luck looks like. And this graph from the study just nails it. The researchers showed people different sequences of X's and O's, like hits and misses. And what happened? People consistently said the truly random, clumpy sequences looked like streak shooting. And the nice, alternating sequences, they called that chance. It's wild. We have this built-in, totally wrong idea of what randomness is supposed to look like. And look, this is way bigger than just basketball. This little quirk in our brains, the hot hand illusion, it pops up everywhere. Basically, anytime we're trying to make sense of a series of events. I mean, think about it. The stock market. A stock goes up 3 days in a row, and everyone's yelling, "It's got momentum!" Or gambling. The roulette wheel lands on red 4 times, someone's going to bet big on black because it's due, right? Or maybe they bet on red because it's a hot table. It happens in our own lives, too. You have a few great days at work and you feel like you're unstoppable. Or a couple of things go wrong and suddenly it feels like you're in a slump. So, let's be super clear. The takeaway here is not that these athletes aren't skilled. They are incredibly, unbelievably skilled. The point is that their performance, from one shot to the next, is just a lot more random than our gut tells us it is. This is so much bigger than basketball. It's about how our brains are desperate to find patterns and create stories. And that leaves us with a really important question to ask ourselves. Where else in your life might you be seeing a hot hand that isn't really there?